RPM Racing is most notable for being the first game by one of the most successful video game developers to date, Blizzard Entertainment. And that's all the positives out of the way, especially considering what followed after. In short, the game here really just hits the mark. The ideas are there, just the execution, well. One of the principal items hidden in the car is the existence of a robust track editor with 6 slots to say custom tracks. Yeah, it's pretty slick for its time. Everything's grid based and there are sliders to determine the height of the pieces. It's legitimately impressive for a console game back in 1991. You have to remember, this is especially given we'd only just started to separate away from passcodes to a more battery-orientated save function. Obviously, we can go back into the early NES era and say, oh, well, Zelda came with batteries and many other randomized cartridges in there. But most used passcodes, and most got away with it for the longest possible time. And in all honesty, the track editor is intuitive. It's like, I suppose you want to say it's almost like a rudimentary Mario Maker. Yeah, it's as simple as it allows the less technically minded individual to create something pretty impressive and playable within just a few minutes. Now, I digress. We're going through the technicalities of creating your own tracks. I'm not really talking about the original game, so we should go back to that. RPM's racing progression system in the main game is done in a fairly unique way. For placing in the top 2 positions, you are rewarded with cash. Similar kind of situation to the adventure mode on Super Hang-On. That cash can be used to purchase upgrades for your car, very similar to that game. But more importantly, you can pay money to advance to harder races, with, as a result, bigger payouts. These races also have a fee to race, and this does present an interesting dilemma while playing. It's the essence of, do you upgrade your car and have an easier time in lower level races, albeit not really earning as much as you could potentially? Or do you spend your money to advance to higher paying races, but have a more difficult time trying to place in those first 2 positions? You see, risk-reward strategy here is a nice twist on an otherwise standard game. It's one that we'll see really come into its own around the likes of the Dreamcast and Gotham Street Racing, and what eventually became, I suppose, Forza in its eventual terms. RPM Racing runs a higher resolution really than most of the Super Nintendo games. That's something that really should be said to its benefit. But there is a bit of a strange dithering effect over everything except most of the sprite-based car models. The cars display a rather large amount of ghosting at times, and even so, they're not immune from looking bad. You see, it also uses a split-screen display even in single player. Yeah, it's irritating, and sadly, it's a bit disappointing really for a racing game of its stature. There is no real sense of speed in this game. It feels not painfully, but awfully slow. And it's just, I don't want to say it's a bad game. The technical developments behind it showed promise. It showed what the developer was going to be capable of, but hadn't quite hit it. You just have to know that while RPM Racing wasn't the best game, you have to also remember that the vastly superior and defining rock and roll racing the spiritual successor, was produced by a team a mere 18 months later, and just felt so much more impressive. In the choice of Super Nintendo cartridges and racing titles outside of the obligatory Mario Kart, would I recommend this one? No, not really. Yeah, there are far better ones out there, some using the Super FX chip, others just following the general guise of trying to beat Mario in the gang. But if you were to choose between this one and its closest competitor, Rock'n'Roll is the one you should go for every time. That's not to say it isn't a game you shouldn't have in your collection. It just feels like a first performance run of what was going to happen next as the main event. As an overall review score, this one is a middle ground. There are going to be some people who are going to enjoy it and say it's a fantastic game in their eyes, and there are many people who will appreciate it for what it is, and there is enjoyment there. For me, not being a racing aficionado but still enjoying a good play, it has to be a simple 3 out of 5. It's a mediocre. Knowing that Rock'n'Roll Racing was round the corner and how much enjoyment I got out of that, as someone who isn't a big fan of racing games, I would honestly, nowadays where games can be put on streaming at a moment's notice, implore people to play that one instead. If you have only a few minutes of time, it is the defining one you need to experience. For more reviews like this, check out that retrovideogamer.com for the latest news, reviews, retro footage, retro reviews, and everything else in between. Until then, like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Take care.